Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and just the other day I was watching a video that was talking about the edges of the Roman Empire. In other words, it was talking about how far north, south, east and west the Romans reached. Now, I think the idea of exploration, particularly in classical antiquity, how difficult it would have been, how they would have done, technologically speaking, even culturally speaking, and all the sorts of evidence and documented facts and sources that we could focus on to try to gain answers. I mean, it sounds like an adventure in itself. Now, here's the thing. I have spoken a little bit about this, but then again, this was years ago, and I think now I've got much better evidence that I can use to back up my statements. So today, I would like to dedicate this video to the western frontier. How far west did Rome reach? And this video sort of doubles down as a debunking video or myth-busting video as well, because unfortunately, there are some places that the Romans reached that could already surprise you, and we can document them very easily and very well, both when it comes to sources and material evidence. With that being said, there are some claims that have been made by some people when it comes to really west. Well, you'll see. We'll debunk them today. So already when we're talking about the West and Western expansion of the Empire, the Republic, then Pliny gives us information because he mentions an expedition corps sent to what would be today's modern Canary Islands. To help out for precision, in case you have some geography problems when it comes to that. Okay, so this, as you can see, is the Iberian Peninsula. So you've got Spain and Portugal. This is Northern Africa. This would be Morocco. And boom, in red here, these are the Canary Islands. So we know that Carthaginians explored these, and we also know that the Romans did too. The ancient Roman sources tell us that these islands were found not inhabited, but with traces of previous settlements. So in other words, they used to be inhabited, but then they were already abandoned by the time Rome reached them. This honestly shouldn't surprise us because in fact it is believed, at least among the Romans, that these islands were at one point under Carthaginian hegemony. Alright, well that's wonderful and well documented, but did they continue with their exploration through the seas? Well, this is where we get into the speculative sector of this discussion. In fact, the next set of islands that has been proposed as an area that was indeed explored and reached by the Romans would be the Azore Islands or Azore Islands. I don't know how to pronounce them in English. These ones here. And again, for geographical coherence, you see that this is where we were a minute ago. It would indeed be further west, at least starting from Portugal. So did the Romans reach these islands? Well, we do have traces of population in the Azore Islands, which, as we say, are further west, that have been found, and these predate the Portuguese discovery of the 14th century. But it is, however, impossible to identify the culture of origin. It is therefore impossible to suggest, with any form of real evidence, that the Romans had gone beyond this point with actual data. And for further context, the only sort of material goods that were found were coins. Now, these coins may be Carthaginian, but then again, it's not even 100% sure that they were indeed found in loco. And even if they were, we can't even be 100% sure that these would actually be from classical antiquity. It's very possible that these coins were moved there during the Portuguese expansion in the late Middle Ages. And once again, the coins are a little bit of a weak piece of documentation without any sources to back them up or any other form of cultural evidence, because at the end of the day, it could also simply mean that whoever was living there at one point traded with some Carthaginians. So it doesn't even prove that the islands were in fact under Carthaginian control either, never mind the Romans. Okay, now this was fantastic, and at the end of the day, even though we can't prove it, I wouldn't find it difficult to think that the Romans would have the technological capability to reach these islands. I mean, at the end of the day, they're not that far away from the other islands that we know they did reach. However, when we start talking about this, kind of trying to move further west, what happens to the day kept going, kept navigating, kept sailing, and they keep going west, and it's one day, and it's 3 days, and it's a few weeks, perhaps a few months. Where would these very adventurous Romans end up? They keep going west. America. Now, clearly this is a little bit of a ludicrous statement, but there are people that claim it. And in fact, there are people that push this idea. Would I love it if they could find elements of ancient Roman culture in North America or Central America or South America? I would love it. It would be like, holy moly, how did they even do that? But the reality of the fact is that there is no evidence to point towards this idea. So how can people state that that probably did happen? Some people say, yes, I really think they did reach America. How? Because they think they do have evidence. So let's discuss this evidence. First of all, let's talk about the botanical one. So there is this fruit that is often mentioned that would be a proof of an early contact between the Roman Empire and America, aka the pineapple. There is this idea that ancient Romans had pineapples, and the reason why people say this is because there is one mosaic, more of a mosaic, more of a mural, and it's in Pompeii, this one here. The idea is, oh look, there are grapes, there are figs, there are whatever the heck this is, maybe bread, and or maybe some other fruit, peaches maybe, and boom, here it is, a pineapple in all of its glory. And this is a real mosaic from Pompeii. I was right, it's a mosaic. And some fish. The Romans had fish. Then there is a statue. And here it is. See? This boy, whatever, and they're holding a pineapple. Now, the statue is the hardest one to discuss because at the end of the day, we don't really know what the heck it was representing, but it is very likely that it was some sort of pouch or a bag. I mean, at the end of the day, if you really look closely, you can see that this is clearly not the outer shell of a fruit. This is clearly some sort of fabric that is being bent as the kid is holding it. Now, why it has this shape? Well, some speculate that maybe because it was full of coins. Others say maybe some kind of net. We don't know. But it's not a pineapple. Okay, Mr. Metatron, but how do you explain this pineapple here that we clearly see? Well, actually, what we are seeing here is not a pineapple. I'm gonna justify this with the sources, of course, but this is once again not a pineapple. It's a pine cone. And here is a good image that can give us an idea. Once we see it right next to it, it's clearly a pine cone. How do I know that for sure? Well, first, the Romans never reached America, as far as we know, so I mean... it's obviously Occam's razor. But the other reason is the sources, my friends. The sources. Let's jump right into it. There are several Roman writers and Greek writers that actually tell us about the sort of culinary habits of ancient Rome, and they do tell us the sort of fruits that were very commonly eaten in Rome. And they also tell us about those fruits that were exotic. Oh my gosh, they got this from Syria, or they got that from wherever the heck. And so we do have a lot of mentions of all sorts of fruits, say for example cherries, and they tell us the specific area where they come from, and wow, look at that. Or apricots, for instance, are mentioned. No one mentions pineapples. No one mentions anything that could be in any way, shape or form described or considered to be a pineapple. And to be specific, in case you want to double check what I'm saying, you should check the book 15 of Naturalis Historia by Pliny, where he does speak about a lot of types of fruit that were eaten by the Romans. Martial is the one that mentioned apricots, but you know what else they mention? Pine cones. We are specifically told that the Romans used them in all sorts of decorative and culinary ways. Therefore, once again, Occam's razor, what's more likely that this is an actual American fruit that somehow was brought back by these ancient Romans over 300, 400 years, maybe 1500 years before the actual times when Europeans reached America, like Cristoforo Colombo, Amerigo Vespucci, and all the other European powers and crowns reached America and then brought back some of the stuff, like even potatoes and tomatoes. No, for some reasons, they do this 1500 years before, but no one talks about it. But they do put it on a plate in Pompeii. Or is it more probable that this is a pine cone, since the sources mention, you know, pine cones, and they were common in the area. Thing is, though, that's not the only thing that has been ludicrously proposed as a proof, evidence of ancient Roman American contact. The next one is sweet corn, maize. Not that anyone is claiming that maize was represented or sweet corn was represented anywhere in iconography, because clearly it isn't. Once again, it's an American, yeah, you got that. And we don't have any like DNA or any actual physical evidence. No. What people base this on are the sources. And once again, we jump into Naturalis Historia. In Naturalis Historia, Pliny once again describes a type of plant that we weren't really sure exactly what he means. He describes it physically. He says it's very long, looks like the crest of a horse, has many little buds, if you will, and it's black. Now, some varieties of sweet corn are black, so people are like, proof. The reality of fact is that in paragraphs 54 and 55 of Book 18 of Naturalis Historia, Pliny is describing sorghus, which is a type of black grains, originally from Africa, which was then introduced in Italia from Asia, as Pliny mentions. Okay, the next one is in fact one of my favorite, and it's the idea that, you may have debunked all of these, but what about the shipwreck and the sunflower seeds within a Roman ship? How do you explain that, Metatron? In 1974, archaeologists and researchers found the so-called shipwreck of Pozzino in Tuscany, which belongs to the 2nd century BC. Now, as subs descending underwater and they start collecting items from this shipwreck, what do they find? They find a sort of tablets made of beeswax, which contained medical ingredients. So these are of course brought back to the lab, and what do they find? Well, Robert Fleischer examined these tablets in the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, and inside these beeswax containers he found both medicaments made of herbs and animal content. However, in 1989 a DNA analysis would reveal that in fact sunflower DNA was found on the surface of these tablets. Now, before I tackle this and explain the mystery on how this freaking sunflower DNA was found on top of these ancient Roman tablets underwater, buried for hundreds of years, well, we do need to underline one thing for precision. Do you remember what the claim was? They found sunflower seeds in a ancient Roman shipwreck, yet not seeds. This is a completely different thing. This is DNA, not seeds. But seeds would have been a lot harder to explain, but DNA can easily be explained as a form of subsequent external contamination. And will you look at that? After this statement was made, the archaeologists that were involved with the submarine operations reached out to the professors and the analysts at the institute and told them that the entirety of their gear had been stored near a sunflower field. So the statement was scrapped, clearly post-contamination. But what's really interesting about this, and the reason why I want to talk about it a little more, is it's still incredible what the Romans managed to invent. I mean, a beeswax container that can keep the medicaments of animal fat but also herb origins intact, so that because it separates it from the air and the oxygen. It's genius. I mean, that's what I'm interested in. The tech, the discovery, the understanding, and the fact that we could still have this incredible testament of ancient Roman ingenuity thanks to the anaerobic conditions in which these findings were found. That's what I'm interested in, not the freaking sunflower seeds. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. The next one is, kind of want to cover it very briefly, but it's the idea of a small statue, and I was not aware of this one. I have to thank Dr. Canestrelli for it, my lead researcher. But once he told me, anyways, so allegedly they found the head of a very small ancient Roman statue within a Mesoamerican archaeological context. So there is a dig somewhere in Central America and they find this little statue, well, the head. And so of course this is like, wow, how is it possible? This is within a completely different geographical situation. So how do you explain that? The Romans reached, the Romans didn't reach. No. Unfortunately, someone came out with the explanation of this. And I know it sounds really, really crazy that something like this would happen, but a student declared that it was a joke. In the sense that, yeah, one of the students at the archaeology department that were collaborating with the digging actually added this little fragment of a statue into the dig. I haven't got a clue where they found it. It was probably something they had access to because of their job, I suppose. And then they just added it into the dig just to create a joke for the lead archaeologist. But then after the thing exploded, I guess they didn't say it because they thought, oh my gosh, there are going to be repercussions. But eventually they did come forth. And so, once again, posthumous contamination. It's just that in this case they did it on purpose. But yeah. Anyways, long story short, how far west did the Romans reach? Well, the only thing we can really document 100% is the Canary Islands. Maybe the Azores? I'm still open to that because we know that they had the tech to do it. And at the end of the day, I mean, the Romans were very adventurous and they did test and move around and try to seek places because at the end of the day, they wanted to exploit everything because they hated everyone. But at least they weren't racist. They hated everyone equally. But last but not least, yes, if you look into this, you will run into this idea that the ancient Romans reached America. No, they didn't. Or should I say, to be more intellectually honest, there is no reason for us to believe that they did. But of course, as with everything, if new evidence comes out and they're like, oh look, there is a lorica segmentata in Boston, archaeological digging under 17 layers of, then we can talk. And I'll make a dedicated video, of course. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.